Hello, everyone. This is Tiana Shoei with Made to Conquer. I just wanted to jump in quickly. I do this every once in a while. Thankfully, not very often, but every once in a while, where I do kind of a in-between post. And I wanted to take a minute to comment about last week's episode. So specifically the episode that came out in the first week of June 2024, titled Let Your Light Shine. The reason I wanted to take a minute to talk about it is that it definitely stirred up some controversy, which is not surprising given the topic, and not surprising given the fact that, you know, I talk about things that are uncomfortable for all involved, and I did it in a way where my intention was only to show the love and grace and kindness and compassion that can be found in the Lord. To go into this a little bit, I want to give some background. I don't talk about everything on this podcast for obvious reasons. There are things that are appropriate to talk about and things that are not. But my goal is always to just be authentic with you guys and share what is really going on in my journey with the Lord and what I truly believe the Lord wants me to talk about. With that said, there's a lot that I can't talk about and I don't talk about for obvious reasons. And some of that is just the tremendous amount of responsibility and the things that I deal with on a regular basis. I carry a lot. And while my goal is to be encouraging on this podcast, so I tend to sometimes maybe downplay or not mention some of the challenges that I deal with. I don't do that to pretend that Christianity is easy or that things are better than they are. We know that we have plenty of pretending that occurs in the world, especially in the world of Christianity. So that's never my goal. But there are some things that are worth talking about, some things that are not, some things that are appropriate, and some things that are not, etc. So I don't want to give the impression that I've somehow pretended to be something I'm not or pretended things are different than they are. But with that said, there is a lot that I carry with the things that God's given me. And I'm not complaining. I'm grateful. To me, I would rather have a lot and see God's hand working in my life than not have the things that I deal with. And so there's a lot of heaviness. There's a lot of things that I have to navigate through. And some of them are okay to share on this platform and some of them are not. So with that said, this last podcast episode was definitely something that the enemy didn't like. And I've dealt with some backlash from, from the enemy. I will say that the Christian community has come around and done nothing but been extremely supportive. And I will say that those of you that take a few minutes to send me an email after a podcast has spoken to you, I don't do a good job, and I'll admit this and I apologize. I don't do a good job showing my gratitude and appreciation to you guys for taking the time to encourage me. It really does make a big difference. It really is encouraging. And several of you took time after this past podcast episode to send me an email talking about how encouraged you were by it. And I appreciate that. It really does mean the world to me. And I try to write everybody back. Sometimes my time on that, I'm not as timely as I'd like to be, but I really do genuinely try to get back to everybody. And I can't tell you how much it means to me and how much God uses that just to remind me that even when it's hard and even when it's challenging and even when I've got more things on my plate than I can manage, which, by the way, as Paul and I talk about on Warriors Rising, the Christian life is impossible apart from the Lord. So if you ever feel overwhelmed, welcome to the club, because God said, my strength is made perfect in your weakness, not the other way around. But with all of that, I do have to continually approach this podcast in prayer and with humility, and know that there are going to be things that at the Bema seat, the Lord's going to hit play and go, hey, remember when you said that? And so that's why the Bible says that not many of you should be teachers, because you're going to be held to a higher standard. I put a lot out, and there's a lot of vulnerability that goes on with creating a podcast and creating content. The flip side of that is there's a lot of blessing that comes alongside of it. And so I 100% would choose to obey the Lord any day over take the easy road. So as I dealt with some controversy and pushback on the episode, one of the things that I did is just went back and re-listened to it. Sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't. It just depends on how much time I have. I don't know about you guys. I don't like to listen to myself. So it's not something that I enjoy doing when I have to listen to myself. And when I went back and listened to it, just to make sure that my heart, which I hope in the 90 something episodes that I have recorded, my heart of always showing the love, the kindness, and the compassion of the Lord, just to make sure that that is what's shown through, but not compromising on also God's standards in his word, because God does have standards, and he does have, the declarations in his word that we as Christians can't cower back. And I know that sometimes when we have to take that hard stand, that the world tells us that that is the definition of being unloving. And so with that in mind, I went back and re-listened to it. And I will say that while I do not back down from any of the truths that I spoke, and I will stand by the things that I spoke when it comes to the fundamental truths. When I was going through the section and talking about the ad that I saw from the airline, and when I was talking about the scientific beliefs in the world, I used some language in the heat of the moment in my passion that if I had slowed down just a little bit, I might not have used words like idiotic. And I certainly would have been a little less emotional in that and tried to be a little bit more just factual. And so I can see how if I were a non-believer or maybe a young Christian listening to me navigate those two different things, it might have come across differently than I intended it to. And I wanted to take a second to just acknowledge that, and acknowledge that, I believed in evolution, and I believe the mainstream narrative of science for a very long time. And so one is not an idiot to believe those things, because it's what's taught. It's what's normalized. I mean, it's for those of us who grew up like myself in the public school system, it's what we were told is how science evolved. And so, me getting zealous and in the heat of the moment is because for so long Christians have been gaslit and told that there's something wrong with us. When I started doing the research and I started looking into the data, and I realized my whole life I've been told that I'm the wrong, when I come to find out that it's the exact opposite. That passion and that frustration, I think, came out in some of the language that I used. And when I was talking about the seatbelts, from the airline, the point that I was trying to make was that the world is so bent on making its point that it doesn't see the irony lost in the basic advertisement that it was posting. And so to me, it wasn't that I was mocking homosexuality in that post. I was trying to say, if your point is to prove that it is as normal as heterosexuality, you did not make that point with your post. You made the exact opposite. And so that was the point that I was trying to make, is that this is the day and age in which we live, where good is called evil and evil is called good. And, things that are common sense are treated as though they're not. And so I went back and listened, and I would have toned down the veracity and perhaps some of the language that I use. I would not change the message, because the heart of the message is the same, which is that we are more than our sinful identities, and we can have more. Every single person, and none of us is better than anybody else. Some of us have been set free because of what Jesus did, and some of us are still in bondage. And those of us who've been set free are offering an invitation to everybody else to say, there's something better for you. And I wish for your sake that you could see what freedom actually looks like. And that was my heart and my intention. So I want to stand by what I was saying, that as Christians, we have to speak those uncomfortable truths from a place of genuine love, genuinely longing to see people set free, not because we want to put people down, not because we want to, somehow, condescend people in any way, but because instead we are doing what Jesus did for us, which is offering an invitation based in his sacrifice, based in his love, for something greater. And so I do apologize for the language, using the term like idiotic. That was not the best way to express my point. And I do want to take a minute to just apologize for that. It has become evident to me that the things that I was taught and believed for a long time about science are, it's hard to describe it, but it's not laughable, and it's a challenging thing, but it really is absurd. It really is absurd, some of the leaps of faith and some of the huge gaps in the data that the world has to believe. And yes, I'm very familiar with, Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion, and Sam Harris's, Letters to a Christian Nation, and I'm very familiar with the atheist arguments and with the scientific points, and they have the appearance of wisdom. They genuinely do. And that's why I don't want to ridicule anybody who believes or has believed those things in the past, because it's not like it's not a convincing or compelling argument. It's just when you really dig into the data and you really begin to understand the fundamentals, that it has become evident to me that Christians have been gaslit. And so I wanted to encourage Christians to say, look, you're not the underdog in this case. Yes, we're the minority. Jesus said broad is the road that leads to destruction and narrow is the road that leads to life. But for so long, the church has been gaslit into being told that you guys, it's faith or science. And that's not the way that it works. And it was actually, the scientific revolution was actually born because Christians believed that there was an intelligent mind behind the universe and that we could discover how the universe works because of the intelligent mind. And so I just wanted to reiterate that and apologize because my language was definitely not the best way I could have expressed it. So anyway, I've waxed long. Thank you for taking a minute to let me share my heart on this and understand that, I make mistakes. There are things that I would change, but I can't live my life in the rearview mirror, and I have to move forward. And so this is my moving forward, but also offering, hey, there was a better way to say what I said. And I definitely got caught up in the heat of the moment. And I would love to tell you that I'm never going to make a mistake again. I'm going to endeavor to do everything I can to always represent Christ the way that he would like us to be represented, but knowing that I am an imperfect, fallible person, and I'm not going to be perfect. But there's grace for that. And sometimes it's important, for people like me to stumble, to show you that, not that mistakes aren't mistakes, but that God's grace is bigger than our mistakes. So thank you guys for taking the time to listen to this and let me share my heart. And I appreciate all of your support and love. It means the world to me. And you know what? Let's keep on keeping on, because God is good.